One of the biggest mistakes people make after experiencing narcissistic abuse is thinking that the effects will just fade over time. You might expect that once you leave the toxic situation, everything will magically go back to normal, but it's not that simple. Victims of narcissistic abuse often develop some unusual behaviors that may seem confusing, both to others and even to themselves. These behaviors are coping mechanisms that help them deal with the emotional chaos they've gone through. Today, let's dive into some of these behaviors, why they happen, and how to cope. Ready? Here we go. 1. Talking in circles. After narcissistic abuse, you might find yourself talking in circles, avoiding direct answers, almost like you're walking on eggshells. It's a way of protecting yourself from confrontation because in the past, even the smallest thing you said could have been twisted or used against you. Dr. Raman Vasila, a clinical psychologist, explains that narcissists create constant uncertainty, making you feel like you always have to tread carefully. So, instead of answering questions directly, you might talk around them to avoid conflict. How to cope? Try focusing on building confidence in your voice and practice speaking directly in safe, supportive spaces. Remind yourself that your thoughts and feelings are valid and deserve to be expressed. 2. Binge eating or restricting food. After going through narcissistic abuse, food might either become your comfort or your enemy. You may binge eat to fill an emotional void or restrict your food to regain some control. Dr. Ramain Devesa, a psychologist, says the emotional roller coaster of abuse often leaves you feeling out of control. Food can become a way to cope, either for comfort or as a form of punishment. It's your way of trying to find stability amidst the chaos. How to cope? Focus on nourishing your body with healthy choices and be aware of your emotional triggers when it comes to food. 3. Adopting new personas. A strange behavior you might notice after narcissistic abuse is changing who you are depending on the group you're with. During the abuse, you probably had to constantly adjust yourself to please the narcissist, which made you lose touch with your true identity. Dr. Gabor Mate, a trauma expert, explains that living in a constant state of emotional survival makes it easy to forget who you really are. So, after the abuse, you may find yourself shifting your personality to fit in and gain approval. How to cope? Focus on rediscovering your true interests and values. Surround yourself with people who support you for who you really are, not who you feel you need to be. 4. Compulsive self-monitoring. After narcissistic abuse, you might act like your own personal security camera, constantly monitoring your every word, action, and even your facial expressions, like you're afraid someone will catch you slipping up. Dr. Robin Stern, author of The Gaslight Effect, explains that narcissistic abuse makes you doubt yourself and second-guess everything you do. Even after the abuse, you may still be overly cautious about how you act or react. How to cope? Practice self-acceptance and mindfulness, focusing on being in the present moment and gradually allowing yourself to express your true self without fear of judgment. 5. Over-explaining yourself. If you've experienced narcissistic abuse, you might find yourself over-explaining your actions and feelings, trying to convince others, and maybe even yourself, of their validity. This often comes from the need to justify yourself constantly to avoid conflict with the narcissist. As therapist Dr. Jennifer Freed notes, when you've been invalidated, your voice can feel small, so you overcompensate by giving too much information. In regular conversations, this can look like excessive details that leave you feeling exhausted. How to cope? Set small goals to express yourself more clearly and remind yourself that you don't need to justify your feelings to anyone. Your voice is already valid. 6. Compulsive Googling. After narcissistic abuse, you might find yourself compulsively Googling things, searching for validation or reassurance online. It's like you're trying to find answers to questions that were dismissed or belittled during your abusive relationship. Dr. Alexander Solomon explains that when you've been told your feelings don't matter, you may turn to the internet to find someone who agrees with you. This can lead to over-researching every little detail, spending way too much time gathering information just to feel secure. How to cope? Set limits on how much time you spend researching online and remind yourself that external validation often makes doubts worse, not better. 7. Impulsive spending. After narcissistic abuse, you might find yourself shopping to fill an emotional void, using your credit card like a quick fix for your pain. Every trip to the store may feel like a mini therapy session where buying new things gives you a temporary boost. As psychotherapist Dr. John Emoto explains, people often shop to fill an emotional gap, thinking that new things will make them feel better. But that quick happiness often leads to regret and a financial hangover. How to cope? Create a budget and practice mindful shopping by waiting 24 hours before making any purchases. This will help you separate genuine needs from emotional impulses. 8. Self-care extremes. After dealing with narcissistic abuse, you might swing between extreme self-care habits. One minute you're pampering yourself like royalty, indulging in spa days and bubble baths, and the next, you're neglecting your basic needs or skipping meals altogether. This emotional roller coaster can happen because you're trying to reclaim some control and comfort, but it often just leads to more stress. Dr. Romain Devesa explains that after narcissistic abuse, self-care can feel like an all-or-nothing endeavor. How to cope? Aim for balance by incorporating small, consistent self-care practices that address both indulgence and basic needs without swinging to extremes. 9. Repeatedly touching your face. After narcissistic abuse, you might find yourself touching your face a lot, especially around your mouth and chin. This can be a way of soothing anxiety or discomfort from the stress you've experienced. Dr. Terawell, a psychologist, explains that self-soothing gestures like face-touching often signal a need for comfort or reassurance. How to cope? Be mindful of this behavior and try replacing it with other calming gestures, like squeezing a stress ball or deep breathing. 10. Rocking. If you find yourself rocking back and forth, especially when you're standing or feeling stressed, this might be your body's way of calming anxiety. After experiencing narcissistic abuse, you may have learned to see kindness with suspicion, like it's hiding a hidden agenda. Dr. Stephen Stye explains that when you've been mistreated, even small gestures of care can feel like emotional landmines. How to cope? Recognizing this pattern is an important step in understanding how your experiences shape your reactions. Take your time in letting your guard down and know that it's okay to receive genuine care without feeling threatened. Wrapping up, the behaviors we've talked about are not just quirks, they're survival tactics shaped by the intense emotional toll of narcissistic abuse. It's important to remember that these behaviors don't define who you are, they are simply ways you've adapted to cope with past pain. If you find yourself, or someone you know, struggling with these behaviors, remember that healing is a journey and seeking help along the way is okay. Embrace your feelings, understand why certain behaviors pop up, and take it one step at a time. Be kind to yourself, you deserve to heal, and brighter days are ahead.